On the way to propose to his new fiancée, the millionaire saw his ex-wife at a bus stop, holding twins who looked exactly like him. Chicago glowed in quiet confidence as Darrell Glover steered his car through evening traffic. Headlights slid across glass buildings, reflecting in soft streaks over his windshield. The city felt alive, ambitious, familiar territory for a man who had spent years chasing bigger goals than sleep or silence. His phone rested face down beside him. Notifications buzzed once, then again, but he ignored them. Tonight wasn't about contracts or numbers. Tonight was supposed to be simple. He reached into his coat pocket and felt the small velvet box. Even without looking, he could picture it. Deep navy fabric, silver edge, the ring resting inside like a promise waiting to be spoken. Darrell cleared his throat quietly and practiced under his breath. "Arvid, you've taught me how to slow down." He paused, frowning. "No, that sounds rehearsed," he muttered, adjusting his grip on the wheel. Outside, a bus rumbled past, and he caught his reflection in the side mirror, composed, confident, successful. The version of himself the world recognized. Yet beneath that calm exterior lingered something quieter, an emptiness he rarely admitted aloud. He tried again. "I used to think winning meant moving faster than everyone else," he said softly. "But with you, I learned how to stay." The words hung in the car for a moment. He exhaled slowly, almost relieved. Success had always come easily when it involved work. People were different. Relationships didn't follow timelines or strategies. They required patience, something he had only begun to understand after meeting Arvid Langworth. Traffic slowed as the skyline faded into warmer streets lined with cafes and small storefronts. Darrell tapped the steering wheel in rhythm with a distant song playing on the radio. Tonight would be a new chapter, a steady future, something peaceful. At least that's what he believed. A memory crossed his mind, a boardroom filled with applause earlier that afternoon. Investors congratulating him, partners shaking his hand, numbers climbing higher than ever before. The room had been loud, confident, full of admiration. And yet, when the meeting ended, he had lingered near the window alone, staring down at the city as though searching for something beyond the skyline. Arvid's voice from a phone call earlier echoed gently in his thoughts. "Don't forget to eat before tonight," she had teased. "Big moments require energy." He had smiled at that. She noticed details others overlook, when he sounded tired, when he spoke too quickly, when he forgot to breathe between achievements. That calm presence was what made him want to propose. The traffic light ahead shifted from green to yellow. Darrell slowed, rolling to a quiet stop. Red. For the first time that evening, everything felt still. He leaned back slightly, fingers drumming against the steering wheel. A pedestrian crossed the street carrying grocery bags. Another walked a dog bundled in a small coat. He glanced absent-mindedly toward the sidewalk and froze. Across the street, beneath a dim street lamp, stood a woman in a long gray coat. Her posture was familiar before her face fully came into view. Samantha. His breath caught. For a second, he wondered if memory had tricked him. Years had passed since their last conversation, years filled with distance rather than conflict. No dramatic ending, just two lives drifting apart at different speeds. She adjusted her scarf against the cold wind, turning slightly toward the road. Darrell's heartbeat slowed and then rushed forward again as if unsure which direction to choose. "Samantha," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. He stared, trying to reconcile past and present. The woman he once built a life with now standing only a few yards away, separated by traffic and years. Then he noticed the children beside her. Twins. A boy and a girl. They held her hands, their small figures bundled in winter jackets. The boy kicked at a loose pebble, while the girl pointed toward an approaching bus. Darrell watched quietly, confusion settling into something deeper. The twins turned toward the road at the same time. Streetlight touched their faces, and his world tilted. They had his eyes. The night he planned to begin a new life, his past stepped into the street. Darrell blinked, barely aware that he had spoken aloud. The words felt real, heavy, undeniable. Have you ever believed everything was finally aligned, only for one unexpected moment to rewrite the path ahead? He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the bus stop. The twins laughed at something Samantha said, their voices faint beneath the hum of engines. The sound felt oddly familiar, like a melody he once knew by heart. A horn blared behind him. He didn't move. His mind raced through memories he had carefully folded away. Quiet dinners, shared dreams, the slow distance that had grown between him and Samantha when work became louder than connection. He had told himself that chapter was closed, but standing there, watching those children, he felt the past reaching forward again. Darrell gripped the steering wheel tighter. What do you do when life interrupts the version of the future you thought was certain? A message notification lit up his phone screen on the passenger seat. "Arvid, I'm already at the restaurant. Take your time. I'm excited to see you." His chest tightened. One path waited ahead. Warm lights, calm conversation, a proposal that would change everything. Another stood across the street. Unfinished history, questions he wasn't ready to ask. Two children whose eyes mirrored his own. The traffic light remained red. He inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of choice pressing against him. "Stay focused," he murmured to himself. "You're late." Yet his gaze refused to leave the bus stop. The boy tugged gently at Samantha's sleeve, saying something that made her laugh, a sound soft and genuine, untouched by the tension Darryl felt inside. The moment carried no accusation, no drama, just quiet reality, and that quietness made it harder to ignore. The ring box felt heavier than before. He reached into his pocket, brushing his thumb across the velvet surface. Only minutes ago it symbolized certainty, a clear next step. Now it felt like a question. Could he propose while standing at a crossroads he never saw coming? Another car honked. The light stayed red. Darryl exhaled slowly, making a decision before he fully understood it. "Okay," he whispered. "Just talk to her. Just understand." He flicked on his hazard lights and pulled the car gently toward the curb. For a moment he sat there, staring at the steering wheel, steadying his breath. This wasn't part of the plan, and yet something inside him felt undeniably drawn forward, not by curiosity alone, but by responsibility he couldn't explain. Before opening the door, he glanced toward the camera mounted on his dashboard, the one he used when recording reflections for his channel. "If you believe life can change in a single moment," he said quietly, voice steady again, "stay with me on this story, and if you're new here, hit subscribe, because tonight might not go the way any of us expected." He offered a small, calm nod, then he stepped out of the car. Cold air met him instantly as city sounds rushed back in, footsteps, distant laughter, engines humming. Samantha looked up. Recognition crossed her face slowly, gently, like a memory returning. "Darryl," she said, surprised but warm. He stopped a few feet away, unsure where to begin. The twins stared at him with open curiosity, and standing under that streetlight, with the future waiting in one direction and the past reaching out in another, Darryl realized something simple. The red light wasn't just a pause in traffic. It was the moment everything began to change. Samantha studied him for a second longer, as if confirming he was real and not a passing memory. The city noise softened around them, leaving only the quiet rhythm of the moment. "Hi," Darryl said, his voice gentle, almost careful. "Hi," she replied, her smile small but genuine. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same," he admitted. The twins shifted closer to her, curious eyes fixed on him. The boy tilted his head slightly, studying Darryl's face like he was solving a puzzle. Samantha rested a reassuring hand on their shoulders. "Rylan, Nina, this is an old friend." Darryl noticed the pause in her sentence. Not distant, not cold, just thoughtful. Rylan spoke first. "Do you know our mom from work?" Darryl hesitated, then smiled softly. "Something like that." Nina watched him closely. "You look familiar." Her words landed deeper than she realized. Darryl swallowed, unsure how to respond without opening questions he wasn't ready to answer on a busy sidewalk. A bus roared past, sending a brief gust of cold air between them. Samantha adjusted her coat, her gaze searching his face with quiet curiosity. "You look different," she said gently. "Hopefully in a good way," he replied. She laughed softly. "Calmer." That word lingered. Calmer. It wasn't how he would have described himself years ago. The cold evening pressed in around them, and Samantha gestured toward a nearby cafe glowing with warm light. "We were just heading inside while we wait," she said. "You're welcome to join us, if you're not in a rush." Darryl glanced back toward his car, toward the direction of the restaurant where Arvid waited. "I have some time," he answered, surprising even himself. Inside, the cafe smelled of roasted coffee and cinnamon. The twins immediately spotted a table near the window, sliding into their seats with the ease of children who felt safe there. Darryl sat across from Samantha, noticing how familiar and unfamiliar the moment felt at the same time. Rylan swung his legs under the chair. "Mom, can we get hot chocolate?" "Of course," she said, smiling. Darryl stood instinctively. "I'll grab it." She looked at him with mild surprise. "You don't have to." "I want to," he replied. At the counter, he ordered 4 drinks before pausing. "Make 2 of them extra chocolatey," he added quietly, glancing toward the twins. When he returned, Nina's eyes lit up. "You remembered our favorite already?" He smiled, setting the cups down carefully. "Lucky guess." Samantha watched the exchange, something thoughtful flickering in her expression. For a few minutes, conversation stayed light. Rylan described a drawing he made at school. Nina whispered jokes that made her brother laugh. Darryl listened more than he spoke, letting their energy fill the space. It felt strangely natural. Samantha wrapped her hands around her cup. "So, what brings you downtown tonight?" He hesitated, then decided honesty felt easier than avoidance. "I was on my way to dinner," he said. "A big one." Her eyes softened with understanding. "Someone special?" "Yes," he answered quietly. "Her name is Arvid." Samantha nodded slowly, no tension in her expression, only calm acceptance. "I'm glad you found someone who brings you peace," she said. The simplicity of her words caught him off guard. No bitterness, no hidden sharpness, just warmth. "And you?" he asked gently. She shrugged lightly. "Life found a rhythm that works for us." The twins leaned closer to him, fascinated by every small reaction. Nina spoke suddenly. "Mom says you used to sing silly songs." Darryl groaned playfully. That information was supposed to stay classified. Rylan grinned. "You should sing one. Maybe another time," Darryl said, smiling despite himself. The tension he expected never arrived. Instead, a quiet ease settled over the table, as though years of distance had softened sharp edges. Darryl's gaze moved between the twins again, the way Rylan tilted his head when listening, the way Nina traced patterns on the table with her finger, familiar gestures. A feeling he couldn't ignore grew stronger. He set his cup down slowly. "Samantha," he began, voice low enough that only she could hear. "There's something I need to ask." She met his eyes calmly, as if she already understood. The cafe lights reflected softly in her gaze. He took a steady breath. "They're mine, aren't they?" The world didn't stop. Cups clinked nearby, someone laughed at another table, a barista called out an order. But for Darryl, everything narrowed to her answer. Samantha nodded gently. "I found out after I left," she said quietly. "And by then, your life was moving so fast. I didn't know where I fit without feeling like I was asking you to change who you were." He lowered his gaze, absorbing the words. "I never meant to make you feel left behind," he said. "I know," she replied softly. "You were chasing something important to you. There was never anger, just distance." The honesty between them felt steady, free from blame. Across the table, Nina slid a napkin toward him covered in small doodles. "For you," she said proudly. He took it carefully, emotion rising in his chest. His phone buzzed again. A message from Arvid appeared on the screen. "I'm here. The view is amazing tonight." Darryl stared at the words longer than necessary. Two lives existed in front of him now, one waiting under warm rooftop lights, another sitting across from him with chocolate smiles and curious eyes. Samantha noticed his hesitation. "You should go," she said gently. "She must be important to you." "I was planning to propose," he admitted. Her smile paused for a brief second before returning, soft and supportive. "Then don't let me interrupt your evening." Rylan reached for his hand. "Are you coming back?" the boy asked. Darryl's voice came out quieter than expected. "I hope so." Outside, the air felt colder, sharper. He paused beside his car, looking back through the cafe window. Samantha leaned toward the twins, laughing at something they said. The scene felt peaceful, untouched by the rush that once defined his life. He reached into his pocket, feeling the ring box again. A few minutes ago, the night felt predictable. Now, nothing felt certain, and strangely, that uncertainty didn't scare him. It grounded him. Darryl opened the car door slowly, taking one last glance at the cafe before stepping inside. The red light had turned green long ago, but the moment it created was only beginning. Darryl sat behind the wheel for several seconds before starting the engine. The heater hummed softly, pushing away the cold that had followed him inside. He rested both hands on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield without really seeing the traffic ahead. "Okay," he whispered to himself. "Just think." The cafe door opened behind him. In the rearview mirror, he saw Samantha helping the twins pull on their gloves. Nina waved at him through the glass, her smile bright and unfiltered. He raised a hand in return. A warmth spread through his chest, unfamiliar yet deeply grounding. His phone buzzed again. "Arvid, no rush. I ordered your favorite tea." He smiled faintly at the message. That was who Arvid was. Patient, thoughtful, never demanding. Darryl started the car and pulled back into the street. The city moved forward as if nothing had changed, yet everything inside him felt different. He drove slowly, not because of traffic, but because his thoughts refused to settle into a straight line. A few minutes passed before he spoke aloud, testing the words. "I have kids." The sentence felt both heavy and strangely right. He had built companies, led teams, negotiated impossible deals, yet nothing prepared him for the quiet realization that somewhere along the way, life had continued without him noticing. He tightened his grip on the wheel. Tonight had been meant to close one chapter and begin another. Now it felt like he had opened a book he didn't know existed. The skyline shifted as he approached the rooftop restaurant. Lights reflected across glass walls, warm and inviting. Darryl slowed the car near the entrance but didn't step out immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the velvet box. He turned it over in his palm, a symbol of certainty, a promise he had rehearsed a dozen times. Yet after the cafe, the ring felt less like a conclusion and more like a question he wasn't ready to answer. He closed his eyes briefly, remembering Nina's voice. "You look familiar." And Ryland's small hand gripping his. The sound of laughter in that cafe had carried something he hadn't felt in years, not excitement, not ambition, but belonging. He exhaled slowly. "Don't make decisions out of guilt," he told himself quietly. "Be honest." The thought steadied him. He slipped the ring back into his pocket and stepped out of the car. The elevator ride to the rooftop felt longer than usual. Soft music played overhead, while city lights climbed higher through the glass walls. Couples laughed nearby, glasses clinked, and the air smelled faintly of roses. Darryl adjusted his coat, trying to gather his thoughts into something clear. When the elevator doors opened, he spotted Arvid immediately. She sat near the edge of the terrace, a warm glow from the candles reflecting in her eyes. Her calm presence filled the space without effort. She stood as he approached, smiling gently. "There you are," she said. "I was starting to think the traffic swallowed you." "Something like that," he replied, returning the smile. She studied his face for a moment, noticing the tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. "You look like you've walked through a memory," she said softly. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "That's not far from the truth." A waiter poured tea, then stepped away, leaving them in quiet privacy. Darryl looked out over the city before speaking. "I saw Samantha tonight," he said finally. Arvid didn't interrupt. She simply listened. "At a bus stop," he continued. "She wasn't alone." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She had twins with her." Arvid's expression remained calm, open. "And?" she asked gently. He met her eyes. "They're mine." Silence settled between them. Not heavy, just thoughtful. Arvid folded her hands around her cup. "How do you feel about that?" "Like the ground moved without warning," he admitted. "I was driving here ready to ask you to marry me. And suddenly I realized there are parts of my life I don't fully understand yet." She nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "You told me once that success made sense because it followed rules," she said. "But people, they don't." He gave a small, grateful smile. "That's exactly it." The ring box remained hidden in his pocket, untouched. "I don't want to hurt you," Darryl said quietly. Arvid's eyes softened. "You're not hurting me by telling the truth." He hesitated. "I thought tonight would be simple." She laughed gently. "Simple is rare when life is real." He leaned back slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted. "I just know I can't pretend nothing changed." Arvid reached across the table, resting her hand lightly over his. "That sounds like growth, not confusion," she said. Her understanding didn't feel like pressure, it felt like space. He realized something then. The proposal he had planned wasn't disappearing because of doubt about her. It was changing because he needed clarity within himself. "I care about you deeply," he said. "I know," she replied. The city stretched endlessly behind her, lights glowing against the dark sky. For the first time that evening, Darryl felt the rush inside him slow into something steady. He took a long breath. What if everything I thought was the right next step? Needs more time. Arvid smiled softly. "Then we give it time. No disappointment, no urgency, just calm acceptance." He felt grateful for that, for her ability to hold space without demanding answers. Below them, traffic moved through the streets, tiny streams of light crossing intersections. Somewhere not far away, Samantha and the twins were probably heading home, unaware of how deeply they had shifted the direction of his night. Darryl rested his hands on the table. "I don't know where this leads yet," he admitted. "You don't have to," Arvid said. "Just keep choosing honesty." Her words settled into him like a quiet promise. The tea grew cold between them as conversation drifted towards smaller things, memories, laughter, reflections on how much life could change without warning. Darryl reached into his pocket briefly, touching the ring box again. He didn't take it out, not tonight. Instead, he looked out across the skyline, understanding something simple but powerful. The red light earlier hadn't delayed his life, it had redirected it. And as the night carried on, calm, honest, uncertain, he realized that the real story wasn't about a proposal. It was about discovering who he had become when the road ahead no longer followed a straight line. The rooftop grew quieter as the evening deepened. A soft breeze moved across the terrace, carrying distant laughter from another table. Darryl and Arvid sat in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't demand explanations. He looked at her, grateful for the calm steadiness she always brought into his life. "I'm sorry tonight didn't go the way I planned," he said. Arvid tilted her head slightly. "Who says it didn't go the way it was meant to?" He let out a quiet laugh. "That sounds like something you've been saving for a moment like this." "Maybe," she replied, smiling gently. They stood near the edge of the terrace, looking out over the city lights. The view felt different now, less like a finish line and more like a wide-open question. "I won't pretend I'm not surprised," she said after a pause, "but I'm also not afraid of uncertainty." Her honesty eased the tension he had been carrying. "I need time," he admitted, "not because I don't value what we have, but because I don't want to move forward while part of me is still catching up to something new." Arvid nodded slowly. "That sounds fair. No dramatic goodbye, no heavy goodbye speech. Just two people choosing clarity over expectation." As they walked toward the elevator, she squeezed his arm lightly. "Go learn who you are in this new chapter," she said, "and don't rush yourself." The city felt calmer as Darryl drove away from the restaurant. Traffic thinned, and street lights stretched into long golden lines across the road. He turned off the radio, preferring the silence. Every moment from the evening replayed in his mind. Nina's curious smile, Ryland's small hand reaching for his, Samantha's calm honesty. He spoke softly to himself. "I missed years I didn't even know existed." The realization didn't feel like regret alone. It felt like responsibility, a chance to step into something meaningful instead of chasing what looked impressive from the outside. His phone lit up with another message from Arvid. "Get home safe. Tonight was honest, and honesty is always a good start." He smiled faintly and set the phone down. Outside, snow began to fall lightly, dusting the streets in quiet white patterns. The city slowed with it, moving at a gentler pace. For the first time in a long while, Darryl didn't feel pressure to decide everything immediately. He simply drove. If this moment touched you, tap-like, it really helps stories like this reach more people who need them. The next morning arrived quietly. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Darryl's apartment, reflecting off polished floors and minimalist furniture. The space had always felt impressive to visitors, clean lines, perfect order, but now it felt strangely empty. He stood near the kitchen counter, staring at a small drawing Nina had given him the night before. 4 stick figures beneath a bright yellow sun. He traced the lines gently with his finger. "Our family," she had said. The words echoed softly in his thoughts. His schedule for the day buzzed on his tablet. Meetings, calls, a press interview. The life he had built waited for him to step back into it. Instead, he picked up his phone and hesitated before dialing. Samantha answered on the second ring. "Hi," she said, her voice warm but curious. "Hi," he replied. "I hope I'm not interrupting. Just packing school lunches." She laughed softly. "What's up?" He took a steady breath. "I was wondering if maybe I could stop by later, if that's okay." There was a brief pause, not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. "I think they'd like that," she said. "And I would too." He felt something shift inside him, subtle but steady. "Thank you," he said. Later that afternoon, Darryl parked near Samantha's building. It wasn't flashy or grand, just a quiet place filled with ordinary life. Children played near the entrance, their laughter echoing down the sidewalk. A neighbor waved at him politely as he stepped out of the car. He adjusted his coat, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. The door opened before he could knock. Nina ran forward first. "You came back!" Ryland followed, trying to appear calm but unable to hide his excitement. Darryl crouched slightly to meet their height. "I said I hoped to, didn't I?" Samantha appeared behind them, smiling softly. "Welcome," she said. Inside, the apartment felt warm and lived in. Drawings on the fridge, books stacked on a small table, the scent of something sweet baking in the oven. Darryl removed his coat, unsure where to place his hands at first. The twins solved that problem quickly, pulling him toward the living room to show him their latest creations. "Look," Nina said, holding up a paper crown. "We made these for a game." He took one carefully. "I think this suits me." Ryland laughed. "You're the king of bedtime stories now." Darryl glanced toward Samantha, raising an eyebrow playfully. "You've been telling them things about me," he said. "Only the good parts," she teased. The ease between them surprised him. Years ago, their conversations had felt rushed, filled with unspoken pressure. Now, they moved at a gentle pace, free from expectations. That evening, Darryl found himself sitting cross-legged on the floor while Ryland explained the rules of a board game. Nina leaned against his shoulder, humming quietly. "You're doing it wrong," she giggled. "I'm still learning," he replied, pretending to be serious. Samantha watched from the kitchen doorway, her expression thoughtful. "You don't have to prove anything," she said softly when he stood to help clean up. "I know," he answered. I just want to be present." The words felt natural, not rehearsed. Later, as the twins prepared for bed, Nina handed him a small book. "Mom says you used to make voices when you read," she said. Darryl glanced at Samantha, who shrugged playfully. "No pressure." He opened the book slowly, clearing his throat. "Once upon a time," he began, then paused. "Actually, let's start differently." He shifted his voice into a playful tone that made both children laugh immediately. The sound filled the room with warmth. For the first time in years, success didn't feel like something measured by numbers or applause. It felt like this: a quiet evening, shared laughter, and the chance to learn something new about himself. As the twins drifted toward sleep, he stepped back into the living room where Samantha waited with 2 cups of tea. "You've changed," she said gently. "I finally slowed down enough to notice what matters," he replied. Their conversation lingered, softly, filled with honesty rather than nostalgia. Outside, the city continued moving forward. Inside, Darryl felt something different growing, not rushed, not loud, but steady. And as the night settled around them, he realized that the red light had done more than interrupt his plans. It had opened a path he was only beginning to understand. The following week moved faster than Darryl expected. He found himself balancing early meetings with afternoon visits to Samantha's apartment. Some days felt easy: laughter, homework, quiet conversations. Other days reminded him that stepping into a child's life wasn't a simple adjustment. One evening, Rylan refused to put away his toys. "I said 5 more minutes, the boy insisted, crossing his arms. Darryl glanced toward Samantha, unsure whether to step in or stay back. She gave a small nod, silently encouraging him to try. "Hey," Darryl said gently, crouching to Rylan's level. "How about we clean up together?" Rylan shook his head. "You don't make the rules." The words weren't harsh, just honest, and they landed deeper than Darryl expected. He paused, choosing patience instead of authority. "You're right," he said calmly. "I'm still learning where I fit, but helping each other makes the evening easier for everyone." Nina watched from the couch, curious. After a moment, Rylan sighed and pushed a toy car toward him. "Fine, but only because Mom asked." Darryl smiled softly. "That's a good start." As they cleaned up, Samantha caught his eye and mouthed, "Thank you." It wasn't a perfect moment, but it felt real, the kind of progress that couldn't be rushed. The next morning, Darryl arrived late to a scheduled school pickup. A last-minute business call had stretched longer than expected, and by the time he reached the gate, Nina stood beside Samantha with a small frown. "You almost missed it," she said. Guilt tugged at him. "I'm sorry. I'm still figuring out how to balance things." Samantha didn't scold him. Instead, she spoke quietly as they walked. "You don't have to prove you can do everything at once," she said. "They notice effort more than perfection." Her words stayed with him throughout the afternoon. Back at his office, the glass walls and polished desks suddenly felt louder than before. A colleague approached with a new proposal, speaking quickly about deadlines and expansion. Darryl listened, then surprised himself by saying, "Let's revisit this next quarter." The colleague blinked. "You're turning it down?" "I'm reprioritizing," he replied simply. The decision felt unfamiliar, but right. Later that evening, Nina sat beside him at the kitchen table, coloring quietly. "Do you know how to draw stars?" she asked. "I can try," he said, picking up a pencil. His first attempt came out uneven, making her giggle. "That looks like a squished snowflake," she teased. He laughed with her, erasing the lines and starting again. Slowly, carefully, he adjusted the shape until she nodded approvingly. "Better," she said. Samantha watched from across the room, leaning against the counter. "You're patient," she observed. "I wasn't always," he admitted, "but I'm learning." Nina slid a new sheet of paper toward him. "Can you draw all 4 of us?" He hesitated only a moment before sketching simple figures. When he finished, she placed the drawing on the fridge beside the earlier one. "Our family wall," she declared proudly. The words carried warmth, but also responsibility. Darryl stood there quietly, taking in the small collection of drawings, moments captured in crayon and laughter. That night, after the twins fell asleep, Darryl and Samantha sat near the window with warm mugs in their hands. City lights flickered in the distance, reflecting softly against the glass. "You've been showing up a lot," she said gently. "I want to," he replied. "I don't want to miss any more time." She nodded slowly. "They're still adjusting. Some days they might push you away. It's not rejection. It's just change." "I understand," he said. "Honestly, I'm adjusting too. Do you ever regret how things ended between us?" he asked carefully. Samantha considered the question before answering. "I regret that we stopped talking honestly," she said, "but I don't regret who we've become since then." Her words felt mature, grounded. Darryl leaned back, letting the quiet fill the space. I used to think moving faster meant moving forward, he said. Now I'm not so sure. She smiled faintly. Maybe forward just looks different now. Over the next few days, Daryl began reshaping his schedule. He left work earlier, declined evening events, turned off notifications during dinner time. A comfortable silence settled between them. At first, the changes felt small, almost invisible to anyone outside his world. But inside, they shifted everything. One afternoon, Rylan handed him a small soccer ball. Come outside, he said. I want to show you something. They walked to the park nearby, where laughter echoed across the open field. Rylan kicked the ball with surprising precision. Mom says you used to play, he added. A long time ago, Daryl replied, returning the ball gently. They played quietly for a while, no pressure, no expectations, just movement and shared time. When Nina joined them, spinning in circles with her scarf trailing behind her, Daryl felt a sense of ease he hadn't known in years. As the sun dipped lower, Samantha watched from a bench, her expression thoughtful. You're finding your rhythm, she said when he sat beside her. I think I'm finally learning how to stay, he answered. She looked at him for a moment longer than usual, something unspoken passing between them, not a return to the past, but an appreciation of the present. Across the field, Rylan shouted, Dad, watch this! The word caught Daryl off guard. He turned toward the sound, a quiet smile forming as the evening light stretched across the park. And for the first time since that red light stopped him in the street, he felt less like a visitor in this life, and more like someone beginning to belong. The days that followed settled into a steady rhythm. Daryl began arriving earlier than expected, sometimes carrying small snacks for the twins, other times just showing up with a quiet smile and open hands. Nothing grand, nothing forced. One afternoon, Nina ran toward him holding a folded paper. I made something new, she said, eyes bright. He opened it carefully. Another drawing, 4 figures again, but this time the tallest one held a small star in its hand. What's this? He asked gently. That's you, she replied. You always help when things feel big. The words caught him off guard. He looked toward Samana, who stood near the doorway watching the exchange with a soft expression. I'm honored, he said quietly, placing the drawing beside the others on the fridge. Rylan nudged him playfully. You're getting a lot of fan art. Daryl laughed. I guess I need to improve my autograph skills. The apartment filled with warmth, the kind that grew from small, repeated moments rather than grand gestures. Later that evening, Daryl stepped onto the balcony to take a business call. Daryl, we need you back full-time on the expansion, a partner's voice said through the phone. The team feels your absence. He looked through the window at the twins arguing over which movie to watch, Samantha mediating calmly between them. I'll still be involved, he replied, choosing his words carefully. Just not at the pace we used to keep. A brief silence followed. That's unexpected, the partner admitted. People grow, Daryl said simply, and priorities change. When the call ended, he stayed outside for a moment, breathing in the cool air. For years, decisions had revolved around growth charts and future plans. Now the choices felt more personal, less about proving something and more about living it. He stepped back inside. Nina waved him over. We picked a movie. Sit here. She patted the couch between her and Rylan. Daryl sat, feeling the space naturally close around him. Not every moment flowed smoothly. One rainy afternoon, Rylan grew quiet after a disagreement at school. He barely spoke during dinner, pushing food around his plate. Daryl watched carefully, unsure whether to intervene. After a while, he tried gently. Want to talk about it? Rylan shook his head. It's okay, Daryl said softly. You don't have to explain right away. The boy glanced at him briefly. You don't know how it feels. The honesty wasn't meant to hurt, but it landed heavily. Daryl nodded slowly. You're right. I'm still learning, but I can listen whenever you're ready. Later that night, Rylan approached him quietly while he washed dishes. Daryl dried his hands and leaned against the counter. I've done that before, he said. What matters is what you do next. Rylan thought for a moment. Maybe I'll say sorry tomorrow. That sounds brave, Daryl replied. I got mad at a friend, he admitted. I said something I didn't mean. The boy smiled faintly before heading to bed. Samantha watched from across the room, appreciation clear in her eyes. You didn't rush him, she said later. I'm trying to understand their pace, he answered. That evening, Daryl received a message from Arvid. Hope everything is going well. No pressure, just checking in. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Their last conversation had been honest, calm, unfinished. There was no tension between them, only space. He typed a reply slowly. Thank you. I'm learning a lot these days. I hope you're doing well too. Her response came quickly. I'm glad you're finding clarity. The simplicity of her words reminded him that not every connection needed dramatic endings. Some relationships shifted into something quieter, defined by respect rather than expectation. He set the phone down, feeling grateful for her understanding. A few days later, Samantha invited him to join them at the park after school. The twins ran ahead, chasing each other between trees while the late afternoon sun stretched across the grass. Daryl sat beside Samantha on a bench, watching them play. "They're starting to rely on you," she said softly. "I don't want to rush that," he replied. "Trust takes time." She nodded. "You're doing better than you think." He looked toward the field where Ryland kicked a ball toward Nina, both of them laughing freely. "Have you ever had a moment that completely changed your direction without warning? Share your story." I read the comments. For years he had measured success by milestones, numbers reached, deals closed, recognition earned. Now success felt quieter. It looked like showing up on ordinary days. It sounded like laughter carried by the wind. Nina ran back toward them, slightly out of breath. "Dad, did you see that?" The words slipped out naturally this time, without hesitation. Daryl felt a warmth spread through him. "I did," he said, smiling. "That was impressive." Samantha glanced at him, her expression soft but thoughtful. They didn't need to speak about it. Some changes spoke for themselves. As the sun dipped lower, Daryl leaned back on the bench, realizing that the life he once thought he wanted, perfectly planned, perfectly timed, had shifted into something more meaningful. Not louder, not grander, just real. A few evenings later, Samantha suggested they all cook dinner together. The kitchen filled with easy chaos, Nina stirring ingredients with intense focus, Ryland pretending to be the official taste tester, and Daryl trying to follow instructions that changed every few minutes. "You're cutting the vegetables too perfectly," Samantha teased, watching him line them up neatly. "That's years of discipline," he replied with a small grin. "Hard habit to break. Maybe leave a little room for imperfection," she said gently. He paused, considering her words. Years ago, their conversations had often revolved around schedules and expectations. Now they spoke with a calm openness that felt new. As dinner simmered on the stove, Nina tugged at his sleeve. "Can you tell us a story from when you were little?" Daryl hesitated for only a second before sitting at the table. "When I was your age," he began, "I thought being grown up meant never slowing down. I used to race everywhere, even when I didn't need to." Ryland laughed. "That sounds like you now." "Maybe," he admitted, "but I'm learning something different these days." Samantha watched quietly, her eyes soft. The evening carried a gentle warmth, not nostalgic, not heavy, just steady. The following morning, Daryl received an email inviting him to speak at a major business event. A year ago, he would have accepted immediately. He stared at the message while sipping coffee at his kitchen counter. The date fell on the same weekend Nina had a school performance. He leaned back in his chair, weighing the options. A part of him still felt drawn to the energy of big stages and applause. Another part remembered Nina's voice asking if he would come watch her practice. He picked up his phone and called Samantha. "Hey," she answered. "I just got invited to speak at an event," he said, "but it's the same day as Nina's performance." She paused. "You don't have to choose based on us," she said gently. "Your career matters too." "I know," he replied, "but I'm realizing something. Being present here matters just as much." He declined the invitation moments later, feeling lighter than expected. Later that week, Daryl met Arvid for coffee by the lake. The wind moved softly across the water, and she greeted him with the same calm warmth he had always admired. "You look different," she said as they sat down. "In a good way?" he asked. "In a grounded way," she answered with a smile. He told her about the twins, their jokes, their curiosity, the way they had slowly welcomed him into their world. Arvid listened without interruption, her eyes thoughtful. "I'm glad you're finding meaning in this," she said. "I didn't expect it," he admitted, "but it feels honest." She stirred her tea slowly. "And what does that mean for us?" The question hung gently between them. Daryl took a steady breath. "I care about you deeply, but I need to understand this new part of my life fully before I make promises that shape someone else's future." Arvid nodded, not surprised. "I've always believed love should grow naturally," she said, "not because of timing or pressure." They spoke for a long while after that, about growth, about change, about how people evolve when life gives them unexpected chances. When they stood to leave, she hugged him warmly. "No matter where your path leads," she said, "I'm proud of the person you're becoming." Her words felt like closure wrapped in kindness. That evening, Nina ran to him as soon as he entered the apartment. "I made something new," she announced, holding up a colorful drawing. Daryl knelt beside her. This time the picture showed 4 figures holding hands beneath a bright sky. Above them, she had written in careful letters, "Home." He felt his chest tighten slightly. "You added a word," he said softly. She nodded proudly. "Because you come back every day." Ryland stood beside her, pretending not to care but watching closely. Darryl placed a drawing on the wall beside the others. Something shifted inside him, not sudden or dramatic, just clear. He wasn't visiting anymore. He was becoming part of their everyday life. Samantha noticed the change in his expression. "You okay?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "I think I finally understand what staying means." Later that night, Darryl sat alone in his apartment reviewing his calendar. Meetings filled the screen, back-to-back calls, travel plans, interviews. He stared at them for a long moment, then began adjusting. Some meetings moved to mornings, others disappeared entirely. The silence that followed felt unfamiliar, almost peaceful. He leaned back, closing his eyes. For years he had believed that slowing down meant falling behind. Now he realized it simply meant choosing where to place his energy. His phone buzzed with a message from Samantha. "The twins are still talking about your funny voices during story time." He smiled. "I'll work on improving my characters," he replied. Outside, the city lights flickered quietly, no longer pulling him forward at an exhausting pace. And as he set his phone aside, Darryl recognized the quiet truth at the center of everything. The red light had not interrupted his life. It had given him time to see it clearly. The following weeks carried a new sense of balance. Darryl's mornings still began early, but the urgency that once defined his schedule softened. He answered fewer calls, listened more carefully during conversations, and ended workdays before sunset whenever possible. One afternoon he arrived at the twins' apartment carrying a small bag of art supplies. Nina's eyes widened. "Is that for us?" "For both of you," he said, placing the bag on the table. "I heard there's an artist and a future engineer living here." Rylan grinned. "Mom told you I like building things?" "She might have mentioned it," Darryl replied. They spent the next hour drawing and assembling small cardboard creations. Nina carefully colored stars across a paper skyline while Rylan built a tiny bridge from sticks and glue. Samantha watched quietly from the kitchen, leaning against the counter. "You've settled into this faster than I expected," she said later. "I don't feel like I'm rushing anymore," he admitted. "That makes a difference." Her smile held a hint of relief, not because she doubted him before, but because she could see his effort turning into consistency. Not every day felt easy. One evening after leaving the apartment, Darryl sat alone in his car outside the building. The laughter from inside faded as the door closed behind him, replaced by the quiet hum of the city. He rested his forehead briefly against the steering wheel. A part of him wondered if he deserved this second chance, if showing up now could ever make up for years of absence. His phone buzzed. A message from Samantha appeared. "They had a great time tonight. Thank you for being patient with them." He read it twice before replying. "I'm still learning, but I'm grateful you're letting me try. We're all learning." The simplicity of her words eased the weight in his chest. He started the engine, feeling steadier. The day of Nina's performance arrived with bright morning light. Parents filled the small auditorium, chatting quietly while children lined up backstage. Darryl stood near the entrance, scanning the room until Nina spotted him and waved excitedly. "You came," she mouthed. He gave her a thumbs up, his smile widening. Samantha joined him, holding 2 paper programs. "She's been nervous all week," she whispered. "I'll clap louder than anyone," he replied. When the performance began, Nina stepped onto the stage wearing a small silver costume, her eyes searching the crowd until they landed on him. She smiled instantly, confidence returning. Darryl felt a warmth spread through him as he watched her sing, every note filled with joy. Beside him, Samantha's shoulder brushed his lightly, a quiet, shared moment. Afterward, Nina ran toward them. "Did you see me?" she asked breathlessly. "I wouldn't have missed it," he said. Rylan added, "He cheered louder than everyone." Darryl laughed. "I might have gotten carried away." The twins' pride felt more rewarding than any applause he had received on a stage. That evening, after the twins fell asleep, Darryl and Samantha sat by the window again. "You turned down a big event for today, didn't you?" she asked. He nodded. It didn't feel like a sacrifice. She studied him carefully. "You're different from the man I used to know." "I hope in a good way," he said. "In a calmer way," she replied softly. They shared a quiet laugh. "Do you ever wonder how things might have been if we had slowed down back then?" he asked. Samantha considered the question. "Maybe we needed to grow separately before we could understand each other again," she said. Her honesty carried no regret, only acceptance. He nodded slowly, realizing that their connection now felt less about revisiting the past and more about building something new, shaped by who they had become. A few days later, Darryl arrived at the park to find the twins already playing. Rylan ran up with a soccer ball. "We saved you a spot." Nina grabbed his hand. "You're on our team today." He joined their game without hesitation, laughing when he missed an easy kick, and cheering when they scored imaginary goals. Samantha watched from a nearby bench, her expression peaceful. As the sun lowered behind the trees, the twins collapsed onto the grass beside him, tired but happy. "Are you coming tomorrow too?" Nina asked. "Yes," he answered without thinking. The certainty in his voice surprised him. He realized that showing up no longer felt like an effort. It felt like a natural part of his life. As they walked back toward the apartment together, Ryland swung his hand lightly. "Dad," he said casually, "you're getting better at this." Darryl smiled softly. "Thanks for being patient with me," he replied. The words sounded different now, no longer unexpected, just real. And as the evening settled around them, he understood something simple. Belonging wasn't built through grand gestures. It grew quietly, one shared day at a time. Autumn settled gently over the city, painting the trees in warm colors. Darryl arrived at the apartment one afternoon to find Nina waiting by the window, bouncing slightly on her toes. "You're early," she said, opening the door before he knocked. "I had a shorter day," he replied, stepping inside. "Thought I'd surprise you." Ryland appeared from the hallway, holding a small notebook. "We made a list," he announced. "A list of what?" Darryl asked. "Things you need to learn," Nina said proudly, "like how to braid hair and make pancakes without burning them." Samantha laughed from the kitchen. "They've been planning this all morning." Darryl raised his hands playfully. "All right, I accept the challenge." The evening passed with small lessons, flour dusting the counter, laughter filling the room, Nina guiding his hands patiently as he attempted a simple braid. "You're improving," she said seriously. "That's high praise," he replied. Samantha watched quietly, her expression thoughtful, as though seeing a version of him she had once hoped for, steady, present, unhurried. "We need you in New York next week," the partner insisted. "The deal won't move forward without your presence." Darryl glanced toward the living room where the twins were finishing homework. "I'll join remotely," he said calmly. "That won't be enough," the voice replied. "This is big." He paused, feeling the familiar pull of his old life. "I'll think about it," he said before ending the call. When he returned to the table, Samantha noticed the shift in his expression. "Work?" she asked gently. "Something like that," he answered. She didn't press further, but her quiet understanding made him reflect on how different things felt now compared to years ago, when conversations like this would have led to tension. After the twins went to bed, Darryl and Samantha stepped outside for fresh air. The street was calm, lights glowing softly along the sidewalk. "You don't have to change your life completely because of us," she said, breaking the silence. "I'm not changing it for anyone else," he replied. "I'm changing it because I finally see what matters to me." She studied his face carefully. He nodded, accepting the truth without defensiveness. "Do you think people really grow?" he asked quietly. "I think they learn," she said. "And sometimes learning changes everything." Their conversation drifted into comfortable silence, footsteps matching naturally as they walked. The next day, Nina handed him another drawing before he left. This one showed 4 figures walking side by side beneath a row of trees. Above them, she had written in careful letters, "Staying together." Darryl felt a gentle ache in his chest, not sadness but realization. The word staying carried weight. He placed the drawing in his briefcase, intending to keep it with him. At work, he opened his calendar and stared at the upcoming trip to New York. A year ago, the decision would have been automatic. Now he hesitated. He thought about Nina's performance, Ryland's quiet conversations, Samantha's steady presence. He closed the calendar without booking the flight. That evening at the park, Ryland practiced soccer while Nina chased falling leaves. Darryl joined them, laughing when Nina insisted he spin in circles to test his balance. "You're definitely not a professional dancer," she teased. "I never claimed to be," he replied. Samantha sat beside him on a bench as the twins ran ahead. "You didn't go to New York," she said. "You always cared," she said. "You just didn't know how to slow down back then." He shook his head. "I chose to stay." She didn't respond immediately, but her eyes softened. "That means more than you realize," she said quietly. Darryl watched the twins race across the grass, their laughter echoing in the cool evening air. For the first time since that night at the red light, he felt completely certain about something. He wasn't standing between 2 lives anymore. He had chosen one, not because it was easier, but because it felt honest. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Nina ran back toward him, slightly out of breath. "Dad, you missed my jump," she said. "Show me again," he replied, standing up immediately. And as he followed her across the field, leaving behind the version of himself that measured success by constant motion, he realized that the most meaningful changes often arrived quietly, through decisions no one else noticed, but that shaped everything moving forward. The next morning began with an unexpected message from Nina. "Don't forget you promised pancakes today." Darryl smiled at the screen before even stepping out of bed. Months ago, his morning started with business reports and urgent calls. Now they began with reminders about small promises that felt just as important. He arrived at the apartment carrying a bag of groceries. Rylan peeked into it immediately. "Did you get the chocolate chips?" "Of course," Darryl replied. "I follow instructions carefully now." Nina laughed, handing him an apron that was slightly too small. "Chef rules." The kitchen filled with warmth as batters spilled onto the counter and laughter echoed between them. The pancakes came out uneven, but the twins declared them perfect anyway. Samantha leaned against the doorway watching. "You've learned fast," she said quietly. "I'm learning to enjoy the process," he answered. The words surprised him, because they were true. Later that afternoon, Darryl received another call from work. This time the tone carried urgency. "We're moving forward without you," his partner said. "I hope you know what you're giving up." Darryl listened calmly. "I know exactly what I'm choosing," he replied. When the call ended, he sat in his car for a moment, letting the weight of that decision settle. He thought about the years spent building something that defined him, and how strange it felt to step back from it. Yet instead of regret, he felt clarity. He stepped out of the car just as Nina ran toward him from the park entrance. "You're late," she teased. "Only by 1 minute," he said, checking his watch dramatically. "That's still late," Rylan added. Darryl laughed, letting their energy pull him fully into the moment. That evening, after the twins fell asleep, Samantha sat across from him with 2 mugs of tea. "You've been making big changes," she said gently. "I'm not running away from my old life," he explained. "I'm just redefining it." She nodded thoughtfully. "I used to wish you would slow down," she admitted. "But I didn't know how to ask without feeling like I was holding you back." He looked down at his hands. "I wish I had listened more back then," he said quietly. Samantha reached across the table, resting her hand lightly over his. "We can't change the past," she said, "but we can appreciate where we are now." The moment carried warmth without pressure, a quiet understanding built from years of growth. A few days later, Rylan asked if Darryl could help him practice for a small soccer match. They spent hours at the park, passing the ball back and forth while Nina created imaginary obstacle courses nearby. "Don't kick so hard," Rylan laughed. "I'm not a professional." "Not yet," Darryl replied with a grin. As the afternoon faded, Rylan stopped suddenly. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Always," Darryl said. "I used to wonder if you'd disappear again," the boy admitted quietly. "But you keep coming back." Darryl felt the honesty settle deep inside him. "I'm not going anywhere," he said gently. Rylan nodded, satisfied, and kicked the ball toward Nina again. Samantha watched from the bench, her expression soft but emotional. He opened it slowly. Inside she had written in colorful letters, "Thank you for staying. No drawings this time, just words." He looked up, his voice quieter than usual. "This means a lot." She hugged him tightly. "We like when you're here." Samantha met his eyes across the room, understanding passing between them without a single word spoken. Darryl placed the note beside Nina's earlier drawings, feeling something settle firmly in his heart. For years, he believed success was something loud and visible. Now, success felt like this: a simple message written by a child, a quiet evening shared with people who mattered, a life that moved at a pace he finally understood. And as the night deepened around them, he realized that the journey he once thought began with a proposal had transformed into something deeper, a chance to rebuild connection, a chance to learn what staying truly meant, and most importantly, a chance to grow into the version of himself he had always hoped to become, one honest moment at a time. Winter arrived slowly, covering the city in soft white layers. Darryl stood by the apartment window, watching snow settle on the quiet street below while Nina and Rylan built a small fort from blankets behind him. "Dad, you have to knock before coming in," Nina announced seriously. He tapped the arm of the couch. "Permission to enter your kingdom?" "Granted," Rylan replied, trying not to laugh. Darryl crawled halfway inside the fort, pretending to struggle with the tiny space. The twins giggled, shifting pillows to make room. Samantha watched from the kitchen, her smile thoughtful. "I am," he admitted. "It doesn't feel temporary anymore." She nodded slowly, as if she had been waiting to hear those words. A few days later, one of Darryl's former colleagues stopped by his office unexpectedly. "You've been hard to reach," the colleague said, leaning against the desk. "People are wondering what's changed." Darryl closed his laptop calmly. "I'm still involved, just differently." The colleague studied him. "You used to chase every opportunity. Now you're turning things down." "I'm choosing the ones that matter," he replied. The conversation ended politely, but it left him thinking about how much his priorities had shifted. Years ago, he would have explained his decisions with long justifications. Now, he simply trusted them. That evening, he arrived at the apartment carrying a small board game he thought the twins would enjoy. "You brought reinforcements," Samantha teased. "I'm preparing for a rematch," he replied. Ryland pumped his fist. "You're going down this time." The living room filled with laughter as they played, the outside world fading into the background. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Daryl and Samantha walked through the neighborhood under soft streetlights. Snow crunched gently beneath their shoes. "You seem lighter," she said. "I feel lighter," he answered. "Like I'm finally living instead of just moving forward." She glanced at him, her expression warm but reflective. "Back then we were both trying to be strong in different ways," she said. "Maybe we didn't know how to meet in the middle." He nodded slowly. "I used to think slowing down meant losing momentum," he admitted. "Now I see it creates space for things that actually matter." Their hands brushed briefly as they walked, neither of them pulling away too quickly. The moment lingered, not rushed, not defined, just honest. One afternoon, Nina asked a question that caught Daryl off guard. "Are you going to live with us someday?" she asked while coloring at the table. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know exactly what the future looks like," he said gently, "but I know I want to keep being part of your lives." She nodded, satisfied with the honesty. Ryland added, "You already feel like you live here." Samantha looked up from the kitchen, her eyes soft. Daryl felt a quiet warmth settle inside him, a sense of belonging that no longer felt fragile. A few evenings later, the twins invited him to help decorate their room for winter. Paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling, and soft music played in the background. Nina insisted he help tape stars to the wall while Ryland adjusted a small string of lights. "Step back," Nina said, studying their work. "Perfect." Daryl looked around the room. Drawings, laughter, small details that carried meaning beyond words. Samantha leaned against the doorway. "You've become part of their world in a way I didn't expect," she said quietly. "I didn't expect it either," he admitted. Their eyes met, and for a moment the air felt still, not heavy with the past, but full of possibility. Across the room, Ryland called out, "Family picture time." He handed Daryl a phone and pulled everyone close together. As the camera clicked, capturing their smiles under soft winter lights, Daryl realized something simple but powerful. The life he once thought he needed to plan perfectly had grown into something real without him forcing it, not through grand declarations, not through rushing toward the next milestone, just through showing up, again and again, until staying felt natural. And as the evening settled into calm laughter and quiet conversation, he felt certain that the story that began at a red light had led him somewhere far more meaningful than he ever imagined. The morning air carried a quiet stillness as Daryl stood outside the apartment building, watching snowflakes drift down slowly. He had arrived early, long before school pickup, simply because he wanted to be there when the twins came outside. Nina spotted him first and ran toward him with her scarf trailing behind her. "You beat us today," she laughed. "I'm improving," he replied, kneeling to her height. Ryland followed, adjusting his backpack. "You're starting to act like one of the regular parents," he teased. The words made Daryl smile. Months ago, he had felt like an outsider trying to learn unfamiliar rules. Now, he moved naturally beside them, matching their pace without thinking. Samantha watched from the doorway, her expression warm. "You've settled into this life," she said quietly as they walked toward the school. "I think this life settled into me," he answered. Later that day, Daryl met with his business partners in a quiet conference room. The discussion was respectful but serious. "We need clarity about your role moving forward," one partner said. "The company is expanding quickly." Daryl listened carefully before speaking. "I'll remain part of the leadership," he said, "but I won't be traveling constantly anymore. I want to focus on strategy rather than being everywhere at once." The room fell silent for a moment. "That's a big shift," another partner admitted. "It is," Daryl replied calmly, "but it's the right one for me." When the meeting ended, he felt lighter than expected, as though he had finally aligned his work with the life he was building outside of it. That evening, Samantha invited him to stay for dinner again. The twins talked endlessly about their day, each story blending into laughter. Afterward, while the children worked on homework, Samantha joined him near the window. "You've made choices that would have been impossible for you before," she said. "I think I was afraid of slowing down," he admitted. "Now I see that slowing down doesn't mean losing momentum. It means moving with intention." She smiled softly. "You sound peaceful." "I feel peaceful," he replied. A quiet pause settled between them. "Do you ever wonder where this is leading?" he asked gently. She looked at him thoughtfully. "I think we're learning to build something steady first, without rushing to define it. Her answer carried a sense of calm that matched how he felt. One weekend afternoon, Rylan invited Daryl to watch his soccer practice. Parents lined the field while children ran across the grass with boundless energy. Daryl cheered loudly, earning a playful eye roll from Rylan. After practice, the boy walked beside him, kicking small stones along the path. "My coach asked if you're coming to the next game too," Rylan said. "Of course," Daryl replied. Rylan hesitated before speaking again. "It's nice having you there." The simplicity of the statement carried more weight than any long speech. Nina joined them, swinging her arms happily. "Mom says we might go ice skating soon," she said. "You have to come." "I wouldn't miss it," he answered. Samantha walked slightly behind them, watching the easy connection grow stronger each day. That night, the apartment felt especially calm. The twins fell asleep early, exhausted from the day's activities. Daryl and Samantha sat at the kitchen table with warm tea, the soft hum of the city outside the window. "You've changed," she said again. But this time her voice carried more certainty. "I think I've finally stopped trying to outrun my own life," he replied. Their hands brushed lightly as they reached for the same mug. Neither of them pulled away immediately. The moment wasn't dramatic, just quiet and real. "Back then we didn't know how to slow down together," she said. "Maybe we needed time apart to understand how to meet in the middle," he answered. She nodded slowly. Across the room, the wall of drawings reflected the story of the past months. Laughter, growth, connection. Daryl leaned back in his chair, realizing something simple but profound. The red light that once felt like an interruption had guided him toward a life built on presence rather than pressure. And as the night deepened around them, he understood that the journey wasn't about choosing between the past and the future. It was about learning how to stay, one honest step at a time. Spring arrived quietly, melting the last traces of winter from the sidewalks. Daryl walked beside Samantha and the twins toward the park, sunlight warming the air in a way that felt like a fresh beginning. Nina skipped ahead, pointing at the blooming trees. "Everything looks new again." Daryl smiled at her words. "Sometimes it just takes a little time for things to grow." Rylan carried his soccer ball under one arm, glancing back at him. "You're coming to the game tomorrow, right?" "I wouldn't miss it," Daryl replied. The certainty in his voice surprised him, not because he felt unsure, but because showing up had become second nature. Samantha walked beside him, her steps matching his naturally. "You look peaceful lately," she said. "I feel like I finally understand where I'm supposed to be," he answered. The following afternoon, the twins' laughter echoed across the soccer field. Parents gathered along the sidelines, cheering and chatting while children chased the ball with endless energy. Daryl stood beside Samantha, clapping loudly whenever Rylan made a good pass. "You're more enthusiastic than the coach," she teased. "He deserves it," Daryl replied, smiling. When the game ended, Rylan ran toward them, slightly out of breath. "Did you see my last kick?" he asked. "I saw everything," Daryl said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Nina wrapped her arms around him suddenly. "Now it's my turn to pick what we do next. What's the plan?" he asked. "Ice cream," she announced, proudly. They walked together down the street, the simple routine feeling more meaningful than any grand celebration. Later that evening, after the twins went to bed, Daryl and Samantha sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker to life. "You've built something beautiful with them," she said softly. "We built it," he corrected gently. She looked at him thoughtfully. "Do you ever think about what comes next, for us?" The question lingered in the air, calm but honest. "I don't want to rush anything," he said, "but I do know that being here, with you and the twins, feels right." She nodded slowly, her expression warm. "I feel that too," she admitted. Their conversation didn't need grand promises. It was enough to acknowledge the connection growing between them, shaped by time, patience, and mutual understanding. Daryl's workdays grew more focused but less overwhelming. He guided his company from a distance, trusting his team while making space for the life he had built outside the office. One afternoon, Nina sat beside him at the table while he reviewed documents. "You work differently now," she observed. "How so?" he asked. "You smile more," she said simply. He laughed softly. "I guess I do." Rylan joined them, holding a new drawing. We added another picture to the wall. Daryl stood to look at it. 4 figures standing under a bright sky, holding hands again. Each drawing felt like a chapter of a story unfolding slowly. As summer approached, the park became their favorite meeting place. One evening, Daryl sat on a bench watching the twins race across the grass while Samantha leaned beside him. "Do you remember that night at the red light?" she asked. "Every detail," he replied. She smiled softly. "I thought it would just be a brief conversation." "So did I," he admitted. "I had no idea it would change everything." They sat in comfortable silence, the sound of laughter filling the air. Across the field, Nina waved at him excitedly. "Dad, watch this!" she shouted. In that moment, he realized something simple. The life he once tried to control had become more meaningful when he stopped forcing it. Not through dramatic decisions, not through rushing toward the next milestone, just through choosing to stay, day after day, until the path ahead felt clear. And as the evening sunlight stretched across the park, Daryl understood that the most powerful changes often arrive quietly, guiding you toward exactly where you were meant to be. Summer settled warmly over the city, bringing longer evenings and slower mornings. Daryl arrived at the park carrying a small picnic bag, while Nina and Rylan raced toward him with excited energy. "You remembered the lemonade?" Nina cheered. "I follow instructions now," he said with a grin. They spread a blanket under a large tree while Samantha unpacked sandwiches. The moment felt simple, almost ordinary, yet Daryl noticed how naturally he moved within it, no longer feeling like a guest in someone else's life. Rylan leaned back on his elbows. "We should do this every week." "That sounds like a tradition," Daryl replied. Samantha watched them quietly, her expression calm and content. "You've found your rhythm," she said softly. "I think I stopped chasing the idea of perfect timing," he answered. "Now I just focus on being present." He stood immediately, walking toward her with an easy smile. Later that evening, Daryl walked alone through the neighborhood while the twins finished a movie upstairs. Warm lights glowed from apartment windows, reminding him of the countless nights he once spent working late instead of slowing down. He paused near a crosswalk, the signal turning red. For a moment, the memory of that night months ago returned vividly. The bus stop, the twins' familiar eyes, the feeling of everything shifting without warning. He smiled faintly to himself. Back then, he thought the red light had interrupted his plans. Now he understood it had given him a chance to see what truly mattered. When the signal turned green, he continued walking, feeling grounded in a way he hadn't known before. After the twins fell asleep, Samantha joined him on the couch with 2 cups of tea. "You've been spending more time here than at your own place lately," she said gently. He nodded. "It feels natural." She hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I don't want us to rush into anything just because things feel comfortable," she said. "But I also don't want to pretend this is just friendship anymore." Her honesty met his own thoughts. "I don't want to force a label on what we're building," he replied. "I just know I care about you, not because of the past, but because of who we are now." Their hands brushed lightly, lingering for a moment longer than usual. No dramatic declarations followed, just a quiet understanding growing stronger. The next afternoon, Nina and Rylan whispered to each other while watching Daryl help Samantha carry groceries. "You two smile a lot," Nina said suddenly. Samantha laughed softly. "We always smiled." "No," Rylan added. "It's different now." Daryl raised an eyebrow, playfully. "Are we being observed?" "Always," Nina replied with a giggle. The twins' openness made the atmosphere lighter, reminding him how naturally children accepted change when it came from genuine connection. A few days later, they visited the same park where Daryl had first started feeling at home. The twins ran ahead, chasing bubbles that drifted through the air. Samantha walked beside him, her pace matching his perfectly. "You don't walk as fast anymore," she teased. "And you still remind me to slow down," he replied with a smile. They paused near a small bridge overlooking the water. "For a long time, I thought success meant always moving forward," he said quietly. "Now I realize it's about knowing when to stop and appreciate where you are." She looked at him thoughtfully. "And where are you now?" He glanced toward the twins laughing in the distance, then back at her. "Exactly where I'm meant to be," he answered. As the sun began to set, casting warm colors across the sky, Daryl felt a sense of calm certainty settle inside him. The journey that began with a single unexpected moment had grown into something steady and meaningful. Not loud, not rushed, just real, built one honest step at a time. The next morning arrived slowly, sunlight filtering through the curtains while Nina and Rylan argued playfully over which cereal to eat. Daryl stood at the kitchen counter pouring juice, listening to their voices blend into the rhythm of the apartment. "You always pick the chocolate one," Nina said. "Because it's the best," Rylan replied. Daryl raised a brow. "Sounds like a serious debate. Should I call a meeting?" Samantha laughed softly. "I think they'll survive without a formal decision." The moment felt small, almost ordinary, yet Daryl noticed how naturally he fit into it now. Months earlier, he would have watched from a distance, unsure of where he belonged. Now he moved through the morning like he had always been there. When the twins left for school, Nina hugged him quickly before running ahead. "Don't forget movie night," she reminded him. "I wouldn't dare," he replied. That afternoon, Daryl returned to his apartment to pick up a few things. The space felt quiet, almost too still compared to the laughter he had grown used to hearing. He packed a small suitcase slowly, not because he planned to leave his home behind, but because he realized he spent most evenings elsewhere now. Later, when he arrived at Samantha's apartment, she noticed the bag immediately. "Extended visit?" she asked gently. He nodded. "If that's all right with you." Her smile answered before her words did. "You're always welcome." The twins cheered when they saw him unpacking a few books onto the shelf. "Does this mean you're staying longer?" Nina asked. "It means I like being here," he said. Ryland gave a satisfied nod. "Good." That evening, Daryl and Samantha walked through the neighborhood while the twins played with a neighbor's dog nearby. "Do you ever think about how different things feel now?" he asked. She looked at him thoughtfully. "I used to think our story had already reached its ending," she admitted. "But maybe it just needed time to grow into something new." He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "I don't feel like I'm trying to fix the past," he said. "I feel like I'm building something honest in the present." She smiled softly, their steps falling into the same easy rhythm they had found over the past months. Movie night arrived with blankets, popcorn, and a stack of animated films chosen by Nina. Ryland claimed the middle seat on the couch while Nina leaned against Daryl's shoulder. Halfway through the movie, she whispered, "You make the best movie nights." "That's because I have the best team," he replied. Samantha watched them quietly, her expression warm. At one point, the twins fell asleep before the ending, leaving Daryl and Samantha sitting side by side in comfortable silence. "You've become part of their world completely," she said. "I think they became part of mine just as much," he answered. After carrying the twins to their beds, Daryl stood by the window with Samantha, watching the city lights stretch into the distance. "You know," she said softly, "there was a time when I thought we'd never find this kind of calm together." He looked at her, his voice gentle. "Maybe we had to grow separately before we could understand what calm really meant." Their hands met naturally, no hesitation, no pressure, just warmth built from shared experience. Across the room, the wall of drawings reflected their journey, laughter, growth, and the steady presence they had created together. Daryl felt a quiet certainty settle inside him. The red light that once felt like an interruption had guided him toward a life defined not by urgency, but by connection. And as the night grew still around them, he realized that the story wasn't about a single dramatic turning point. It was about choosing to stay, again and again, until ordinary moments became the most meaningful part of everything. Morning sunlight slipped across the living room floor as Daryl quietly prepared breakfast. The apartment felt familiar now, not just a place he visited, but a space where his presence made sense. Nina wandered in first, hair slightly messy from sleep. "You're here early again," she said. "I like starting the day with you guys," he replied, sliding a plate toward her. Ryland followed, grabbing a glass of juice before glancing at Daryl. "You didn't go back to your other apartment last night," he observed. Daryl smiled. "I guess I didn't." Samantha watched from the doorway, her expression soft. The shift had happened gradually. No big announcement, no dramatic moment, just small decisions that turned into something permanent. Later that afternoon, while the twins finished homework, Samantha sat beside Daryl at the kitchen table. "You've been here more than anywhere else lately," she said gently. He nodded. "It feels like home." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I don't want you to feel like you're giving something up." "I'm not losing anything," he replied quietly. "I'm gaining something real." Her smile held warmth and relief. They didn't rush to define what came next. The connection between them felt steady enough without labels. A few days later, Nina taped a new drawing onto the wall. 5 figures this time, with a small heart drawn above them. "What's new about this one?" Daryl asked. "It's everyone who belongs here," she explained. Ryland pointed at one of the figures. "That's you. You're always here now." The simplicity of their words carried more meaning than anything else. Daryl glanced at Samantha, who gave him a small nod, an unspoken acknowledgement of how far they had come. That evening, Daryl and Samantha walked through the park while the twins raced ahead. "You don't seem unsure anymore," she said. "I stopped trying to plan every step," he answered. "Now I just focus on what feels honest." She slowed her pace slightly, looking at him thoughtfully. "I used to wonder if we'd ever find this version of ourselves," she admitted. "Maybe we needed time to become the people we are now," he said. Their hands met naturally as they walked, neither of them pulling away. As summer faded into warm evening colors, they returned to the same intersection where everything had changed months earlier. The traffic light turned red, casting a soft glow across the street. Daryl paused, smiling quietly. "This is where I saw you again," he said. Samantha nodded. "I remember thinking it was just another ordinary night." "Nothing about that moment was ordinary," he replied gently. Across the street, Nina and Ryland laughed together, unaware of how much had begun there. The light turned green. Daryl took a step forward, matching Samantha's pace as they crossed together. He no longer felt like someone caught between past and future. He felt grounded, present in a life built through patience, honesty, and small everyday choices. And as they walked toward home, he realized that the most meaningful journeys don't always start with grand plans. Sometimes they begin with a single pause and grow into something stronger than anything you could have imagined. The apartment carried a calm warmth that evening. Nina sat cross-legged on the floor arranging colored pencils while Rylan built a small model bridge beside her. Daryl leaned against the counter, watching them with a quiet smile that no longer felt new or uncertain. "Movie night again?" Nina asked hopefully. "I think that's becoming a tradition," he replied. Samantha walked past him, brushing his arm lightly as she reached for a blanket. The gesture felt natural, no hesitation, no awkwardness, just two people moving easily through the same space. Months earlier, every moment had felt like a question. Now, it felt like a rhythm. One afternoon, Daryl returned to his old apartment to collect the last of his belongings. The space echoed faintly, its silence reminding him of a life that once revolved around deadlines and constant motion. He paused near the window, remembering late nights spent planning the future without ever slowing down enough to enjoy the present. He packed the final box and closed the door gently behind him. When he arrived back at Samantha's apartment, Nina noticed immediately. "Did you bring more books?" she asked. "And a few memories," he said softly. Rylan helped him place the box near the shelf. "You don't need that other place anymore," he said simply. Daryl smiled, realizing how true that felt. Later that evening, after the twins fell asleep, Daryl and Samantha sat by the window watching city lights flicker across the skyline. "You've changed in ways I never expected," she said quietly. "I think I finally learned what it means to stay," he answered. She turned toward him, her expression thoughtful but warm. "I don't want us to go back to who we were before," she said, "but I do believe we've grown into something stronger." He nodded. "Whatever this is, it feels honest." Their hands met gently, resting together without urgency. No promises spoken aloud, just a shared understanding that the bond between them had evolved into something steady and real. The following weekend, they visited the park again, the same place where many small moments had quietly shaped their new life. Nina chased bubbles drifting through the air while Rylan practiced juggling the soccer ball. Daryl joined them, laughing when he missed an easy catch. Samantha watched from the bench, her eyes reflecting calm contentment. "Family photo," Nina announced suddenly, holding up a small camera. They gathered together, sunlight warming their faces as the shutter clicked. Daryl looked at the image afterward, 4 people standing close, smiles relaxed and genuine. It wasn't a picture of perfection. It was a picture of growth. One quiet evening, Daryl walked beside Samantha through the neighborhood while the twins ran ahead, their laughter echoing down the sidewalk. "You still walk too fast sometimes," she teased. "And you still remind me to slow down," he replied with a grin. They paused at the park entrance, watching Nina and Rylan race toward the swings. Daryl felt a deep sense of calm settle inside him, the kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. Months ago, a red light had stopped him in the middle of the street, forcing him to face a past he thought was finished. Now, standing beside Samantha while their children laughed under the evening sky, he understood something simple. Life doesn't always follow the plans we make. Sometimes, the most meaningful journeys begin when everything pauses long enough for us to see what truly matters. And as they walked forward together, unhurried, grounded, and quietly hopeful, Daryl realized that this wasn't just an ending. It was the start of a life built on presence, patience, and love that grew stronger with every honest step. If you enjoy stories about growth, second chances, and real-life choices, subscribe to Mr. Cooper Stories and tell me what part of Daryl's journey stayed with you the most.